Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everybody and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast. We're here today to talk about audio description, which is something we began talking about in an episode, previous episode, but I've got a group of people here with different experiences and who work in different areas relating to this topic. So I thought it would be good to have a group discussion and hopefully you'll be able to learn a bit more about this topic and how working with language can also involve working with audio description. For me, it's an important topic because I have a personal connection to it. I am someone who uses audio description as an end user, so I think it's important that people understand what it is, why it's necessary, and what goes into creating audio description, because sometimes, as with the episode we had on subtitles, you just take a thing for granted because it exists. But we don't really know so much about the work of the people who are involved in producing it. So that's another aim for this episode, to find out a bit more about the work that goes into creating audio description. So we have people here. Some people have been on the podcast before. You'll know them. Others are new. They're new to me as well. We've met for the first time this morning. So it's always interesting to have this mix of people. I will start by asking each person in turn to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into more of the topic of audio description. So let's start with someone we already know. Sion, tell us something about who you are and what you do. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here with all of these fascinating people I'm just meeting for the first time too. So I'm Sion Dason. I'm an American voice actor based in Valencia, Spain. I work in many different genres of voiceover, including e-learning, corporate narration, nonfiction narration, and one of my favorite genres to voice is audio description. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about it.
Okay, thank you for being here. And Francesca?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, Kirsty. This is a wonderful opportunity. I am a freelance subtitler, audio description writer, and QCer, working for streaming platforms and live theater performances. I'm Italian, so I work mainly in Italian, and it's a pleasure being here.
Okay, yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast. Philip?
Yes, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's my first time on podcast, so I'm excited to be here. I am German. I live in northern Germany, close to the Danish border, and I'm working mostly as a translator for the Scandinavian languages, Dutch and Portuguese. But since 2019, I'm more and more also working as a audio description writer. And yeah, so I'm quite new in this business, but it's taking more and more capacity of me. So it's nice to hear other perspectives as well.
Okay, thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast. And I think this is interesting already. We've got audio description writers and we've got a voice actor, which are, I don't know if there are any circumstances in which some people do both roles, but they are clearly distinct, different roles. So it would be good to find out a bit more about what goes into both of those roles when we get into the discussion a bit later on. So yeah, thank you for that. Dolores, welcome back. You've been on the podcast before.
Kirsty. Yeah. I began a podcast. First, I volunteered in an association podcast. Then I hosted my own podcast, and I began working more on everything related to audio. So I'm very interested in learning more and going out of my comfort zone, because as a translator for almost 30 years, the written is my field, let's say. So I'm have to keep on learning and having new strategies for the oral world and everything related to audio that I really love. So thanks for this space.
Okay, we had a bit of I don't know if everyone had a problem with the sound. I had one at the beginning. So just to clarify, your interest in audio description, is that in voiceover work or in writing the text for the audio description?
In both.
Both. Okay.
Yes.
So you are someone who ticks both of these boxes. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, and Zaida?
Yes, hi, I'm Zaida, a bilingual English Spanish language specialist, and I'm so grateful to be here. And thank you so much for inviting me. And I work across several areas of language services, including translation, transcription, captioning, and content localization in general. And what that means is I hear individuals, brands, or organizations take their content, whether it's written, spoken, or visual, and make sure I connect with Spanish-speaking audience in a way that feels natural, respectful, and accurate.
Okay, and what's your interest in the audio description topic? Which part are you interested in?
And I'm interested in the transcription, captioning, and voiceover.
Okay, so again, you're interested in different areas as well. So that's interesting to know. So we've got a good variety of experience levels and topics that people are interested in here. So let's go back to Sion. Let's find out why were you interested at the beginning in getting involved in audio description? Like what got your interest at the beginning, and how was that process for you to learn more about this area of work?
Yeah, so I actually didn't learn about audio description until about 3 years ago. I happened to see a LinkedIn job posting from Hearsay Audio Description Agency, and they were looking for voiceover artists to add to their roster. And so I just sent in my voiceover samples. They also liked that I had a background in writing. And so I was onboarded that way. And so we did a training through them, and I was just instantly hooked because I know how important culture and art and entertainment has been in my life. And I was like, this needs to be accessible to everybody. Everyone has a right to participate in this. And so I love that as my job, I'm increasing accessibility. And it's kind of cool that today we're recording on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. I mean, that should be every day, but it just happens to be today when we're recording. So that's how I got into it. And I'm always looking for more opportunities to do more audio description.
I should know that, and I didn't. So thank you for sharing that with us. I had no idea. But yeah, that is good. And it is also important because people have different ways of responding when they're not included. Like some people will just disengage. Like for when I was younger, if things weren't audio described, I just wouldn't engage with them because I thought, well, this is going to be like a waste of my time to be trying to participate in something that doesn't include me, where I don't have all the information. So I'll go and read a book or something, but which is fine. Reading is great, but it's also having the choice. And I think that's the really nice thing about audio description now. We're seeing more of it, that people have more choices about which kind of content they want to engage with, and it also gives them opportunities to make connections and to speak with other people. If you can't access the content that other people around you have access to, then that's putting you at a disadvantage. Whereas if you can, you can also carry on the conversation as well as enjoying the content at the time when it's streamed or when you watch it. So yeah, great. And Philip, how was it with you? How did you get into this area of work?
It was actually a little bit similar to how Sion got into it. I was contacted by an agency because they were looking for new specialists, and they knew about my translation background. So their expectation was that people who are already working in the field of translation have a feeling for language, and they can feel the essence of what we see and what needs to be noted and what needs to be written in the audio description. And then they contacted me, they asked me if that would something I would be interested in. And then I got a training through them. And the first projects were always together with an experienced writer. And then I started to do my own audio description projects. with a quality check, which still goes on. So every project that is done by me goes via a quality check and then is published on a streaming platform, for example. Yeah, that's how I came into it. And now that I have that experience, more clients, more customers come to me and ask if I would do an audio description for them. So that's a growing business, and every project brings new experiences and new learnings. So that's a great path to go.
Yeah, I guess there are things to consider that maybe we wouldn't think about. So are you given information about the time? Because the audio description track can only be played when the characters are not talking. So if you have a scene with various things going on, are you told how many seconds you have to create a text to be read in that time? Is it a bit like...
I do have the picture, so I do have the movie or the series or something, and I know, or I see where I need to put information, and then I also know how much time I have for the description, how much space is given by the movie. So it's not that the agency or that the client says, okay, you have 8 seconds in this for this description, and then you have 8 seconds for the other description. That's something that can be determined by myself.
Okay.
I can look at it and I can say, okay, there is not much information needed because this is an ongoing scene and nothing happens. The characters are still talking in the same situation. Then I can like give some more space to the experience of listening. Background noises, background music, emotions, something like that. I do not need to fill every gap that is within a conversation. So this is something that can be a little bit determined by me, but also I usually get the audio description in the source language. So I know I get a hint where I need to put information.
Okay.
And that actually helps a lot.
Yeah, because you can, I guess you can follow, but there may be culturally some things that may make sense in the source language that don't for people who don't speak that language. So it's being aware about what they would know about and what may be a new concept for them that needs a bit more explanation. But yeah, if you have this to work with as a guide, then that must really help.
Yeah, well, there are cultural differences, but also every language has its own ways how an audio description should be. When I read the script for an English audio description, that's completely different to how a German audio description looks like. In Germany, or in German, we prefer short sentences, and in English, it's whenever, as of, where, when. So the sentences are always connected, and there's always a relation between 2 sentences or 3 sentences. So that's a difference. So you can't just look at the English original, but you see where an information is given, and then I need to validate, is that information necessary in German, or do I need to add more information? And then
I think that's interesting, because English and German are the only ones that I can really make a comparison with, because they're the only languages in which I've actually listened to audio descriptions. And I think even, as you say, the language itself is different in terms of the way the information is presented, but even the types of information. And I think, I mean, maybe there are different guidelines for different producers of this information. But for example, I think in the German audio description, a bit more information is given about what people look like than I've noticed in some of the English ones. So I don't know whether, I mean, this is open to everyone as well. Are there different guidelines depending on whom you're working for as to which information is relevant or appropriate? Or
well, for me, I can say yes.
Okay.
And I try to give as much information as possible, but there's not always the space for it. So I need to determine what information is the most important one, and then I give that information.
Yeah, because if there's a lot of speaking going on, then you have automatically less time for the description.
And German is a language that occupies a lot of space. So the sentences are longer. And when you have someone speaking in the off, the conversation is occupying more space. And then you have less time for the audio description. So that's also a difference between, for example, English and German.
Yeah, it brings its own challenges, and I guess there are similar challenges with other languages. Francesca, how was your introduction into this field of work, and do you have anything that you want to comment on about the discussion that we just had?
Oh, sure, of course. Let's just say that my journey with audio description was very peculiar, actually, because I started in the summer of 2022. I was at first asked to provide subtitles for a local festival. And then at some point, I was also asked to provide audio description for the very first time. So I jumped right in and grabbed my chance. And the people that hired me were so happy that they decided to include me on other projects for audio description for live theater performances. And at the same time, I got in touch with a foreign company looking to create their very first pool of audio description writers for Italian language. And they examined my resume and were like, okay, you may be the right fit for it. And then I started working with them. And since then, I've been cooperating with other companies. They're all interested in, again, expanding their pools of audio description writers. And about what Philip was saying, it made me smile, actually, because when he said that German language is longer than English, maybe takes space to write a sentence, I was thinking that being an Italian native speaker, it's maybe even harder because English takes like 2 sentences to say, for example, he glares, and manages to convey an actual expression of a character that is doing something on screen. Whereas if I had to say the same thing in Italian, it would take me like 5 to 6 words. So time constraints are always a struggle, I guess, any language. About the need, or maybe the fact that some AD writers tend to describe more or less the characters that are on screen, for example, in my opinion, it depends on the kind of product you're dealing with, of the genre you're dealing with. Like for comedies, I find much harder to include physical descriptions. I'm not talking about maybe skin color or the way the people are dressed. Maybe just adding information on their age or the color of their hair can be problematic because you tend to have very little time to audio descriptions. And so you are left with very little room to say, for example, what they're doing. And maybe the viewer or audience is more interested in knowing that than, say, they have brown hair. So I think it depends on the kind of genre you're dealing with. With dramas, it's way different because you have more silence, more pauses between dialogues, and you can have the possibility to include more information.
Yeah, you've got all these different types of information, like the physical appearance of the characters, and I don't watch like action films because they're not my thing. But if you were trying to write an audio description for that, then what exactly is going on in a very short space of time? I imagine that's quite a challenge as well, to try and get as much information as is possible in, but without having the voice actor speaking really fast, because then that affects the listener's ability to understand what they're saying. So you can't just make them go faster. You have to somehow write a text that fits and gives the information.
Or exactly in case of an action movie, you have very high voices or like high noises in the background. Something is exploding, an airplane is crashing down, and then you still have to like combine that with the audio description. So you don't have only the conversation, but also other noises that you have to deal with.
Yes. And if I may also add to what Philip was saying, sometimes all of this clashes with the client's guidelines, because perhaps the client, like, you cannot absolutely cover dialogues with descriptions, and so you have to choose, and you have to maybe get in touch with your QCer and be like, okay, maybe we need to delete this part because otherwise we're going too much over dialogue and our audience cannot understand what's happening in the background. But also you need to explain to the audience what is actually happening. So it's not easy.
And it's a balance, I guess, trying to find the right, because I'm just thinking about the discussions I've had. We had somebody talking about subtitles for a previous episode, and she was talking about when you write them for children, for example. Have any of you got any experience in creating audio description for younger children, or like the kind of language you need to use then? Are there any guidelines on that?
I have created a description for children, and the language cannot, the words you use cannot be as articulated, let's say, than the words you may use in another description for an adult audience. You need to use plainer words that can be understandable to them. And this also relates to the age of your audience. For example, a product that is meant to be watched by children, let's say 4 to 7, is going to have an audio description different, more different than the one that may be addressed for an audience of kids or teenagers or preteens going from 11 to, let's say, 15.
Yeah, I think that is a big difference now, because I see that there is more audio description for kids. Like when I was a kid, like people now ask me, "Oh, do you remember this TV program from when we were kids?" People my age, I was like, "No, I didn't," because okay, some things were educational, and then the narration was probably enough. But anything that had action and things going on, that was so not interesting when you're a child and there's no talking, no information. And yeah, maybe my family would describe that. They became the audio describers. But yeah, I think kids nowadays have a lot more access to the same types of programs as their peers. I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement as well. I'm not saying we're there yet, but it's nice to see this change happening. So
Yeah.
for talking about actually, so once we've got the script, actually reading the script, Sion, what are the guidelines for being a good audio description narrator? What kind of advice or training have you come across? Like what do you have to do with your voice to make it the kind of voice that people want to listen to for an audio description?
I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that I am there to serve the story and not steal focus. So I am not a character. I am not, supposed to give an over-the-top performance. I'm there to provide the key visual information in an engaging way, but not distract the audience member. So, it's called scene sensitivity, right? So I have to respond to what's actually happening in the scene. Like if it is a very somber scene, I'm not going to be super cheerful and bright when I talk, right? Or
somebody's just died and you're sounding
exactly.
like you. Yeah.
Or it's a comedy and I'm very monotone and stiff. Like that's not going to work. And so it's very important to have the right tone that matches the material. But at the same time, my job is just to add coherence for the blind and visually impaired audience member, right? Like people shouldn't actually be talking about me at the end. They should be talking about the characters and what happened in the story. And that was so cool when that happened because they were able to follow it. Not that like, wow, that narrator sucked or even that narrator was great, I feel like if I've done my job well, it's that I've provided the information, I've been a support for the story. And I've served it, but that, I'm not the main focus.
So if you want to be the center of attention, this isn't the job for you.
It's not.
You need to get into acting or something. But yeah, this isn't the job for doing that because it's adding context, it's adding information and adding clarity. Is there a certain speed at which you must read? Like if you're reading for a book, can you get faster if there's a lot going on, or do you have to try and keep to a constant speed of reading throughout the
Well,
narration?
well, just like the writers have the time constraint, I have the time constraint. So if the writers have done a great job, which usually they do, I am able to comfortably say the lines, but there are often times where I have to speed up the space to be able to get in all of the information. And that's part of the training, is to be able to change your pace without losing clarity. The end result still has to be that people can
Mm.
understand what you're saying. So that's one of the skills.
And for all of you, this question is for anyone who wants to answer, as many people as want to answer. What kind of training is available? Like, if for somebody who's new to getting into either the voice narration or the script writing, what training is available? What have you enjoyed, and what have you found useful?
Well, I can maybe answer that for Germany only. Very little. So
Okay.
I wish there were more possibilities, more options, maybe also to choose in between. Right now, there's just a handful of institutions that are offering trainings for audio description, and the market is growing, the demand is growing, and we need more writers, we need more speakers, and we need more trainings.
So there's a gap in the market. How is it for the rest of you? Have you found any courses that you would recommend, or any events? Or
Sorry,
Uh,
Kirsty, may I ask Philip, is it with your combination that you mean that there is a need for that, like the German, or in general, you think?
Well, I'm always looking for German trainings because
Mm.
the demands are different. So I could look for a training in the Netherlands. I could look for a training in Scandinavia. I could look also in England. But the German audio description is different to an English
Mm.
audio description. So it wouldn't make any sense, or it would make sense to get a general overview, but in depth, it would not make sense to make a training in English, because then I make let's say a wrong audio description in German.
I understand.
so,
uh,
Dolores, do you have any like any training experience in Spanish or in English? Did you go on any training courses to help with this?
No, no, I think that there are many opportunities in Spanish, I mean, for training in Spain and also in South America, online, of course. But I don't know if they are good enough, which perhaps is more recommendable than others. I
Okay.
have, I wouldn't know who to ask if it's a good one or not. As Philip said, perhaps first in general and then the particular, depending on the language combination.
Okay, well, if any, I'm going to go around to everyone else here as well, but if any of the podcast listeners have any views on that, then we're going to put this online. It's going on LinkedIn. So if you want to join the conversation by writing some comments, and if you know of a good course, or if you've been on a good course, then it would be good to find out in any of the languages represented here, or any others. So to share the information that we have on this subject. So Francesca, how is it in Italian?
uh,
Is the training available, or did you attend training in other languages?
I must admit, I trained the hard way, meaning reading, listening, and learning. And as Philip was saying, the needs for the Italian audience, or maybe your target audience, are different than the ones you may be reading or listening and original audio descriptions. Uh, I'll try to clarify that. I did not get a very specific training when I first started this gig. So what I did in order to provide a good description was listening to and learn and reading as much scripts in other languages, of course I could understand, than I could. So English, French, Spanish, as many description scripts I could get my hands on. And so I would try to mirror their style into my scripts in Italian. As I was gaining experience, though, I understood that my audience is asking for specifics, it's looking for specific structures, perhaps in the way a sentence is listened to, in the way some descriptions are provided, in the order of the syntax of sentences themselves. So I adapted my style to the needs of my audience. At that time, meaning in 2022, there were not as many courses on audio descriptions as today. So I could not get all the training I wanted. And by the time they started rising, their number started rising, I had already what I needed. And I got what I needed from my audience itself, meaning that I got in touch with my target audience, perhaps people with visual impairments, and asked what they were looking for in another description. And that's how I kind of started my training. It's a bit different than maybe Philip was mentioning, or maybe what you were looking for, but this is it. Yeah.
No, I think it's important, to speak. Okay, you might ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers, and it's about kind of bringing together the feedback to find out what most people want. But I think if you're creating information for a group of people, then nobody can tell you what they need better than that group of people. I think it's really important to involve those who are benefiting from the audio description. I'm not involved in any projects like that, but I know that they exist, and I think it's really important. I know that there's, for example, there's a Facebook group about audio description where script writers and end users get together and can discuss questions, things that they like, things that they don't like. And I imagine that's a really useful place if you're trying to find out about specifics, but also just to find out how people are using the product that you're creating. So I think that discussion is really important.
Yeah, and sometimes I've also been lucky enough to work with blind QCers. So for my projects, so who better than them to say this sounds right, or no, this is not understandable. And as you said before, it's about finding the right balance, because perhaps I've been watching the same product over and over, and some things are crystal clear to me, like links between one episode or the other, or maybe a chapter of a movie and the sequel. But maybe to the audience that's not the same. So my blind QCer would say, okay, this reference is not clear. I can't remember that from the first episode, or maybe from the first chapter of a movie. Whereas this other part is clear. You don't have to over-explain this over and over again.
Yeah, or even things that people just haven't seen. Like I can't remember what it was, but a friend was asking, well, do you know what the logo for this famous company looks like? I said, well, no, because on their website, they don't have an image description. I've never seen this logo. So if you just say it's the logo for whichever company, then that doesn't mean a whole lot to me. So, like some things we just assume everybody knows what something looks like, or maybe a mythical beast or something. But if you've never stroked one, then or never felt a model of one, then you're not necessarily going to know what kind of creature that is. It needs some more description to understand how it looks. And on the topic of sharing ideas and sharing experiences, Sion, I know that you went to a conference recently about audio description. Is there anything that you could share with us, like your main takeaways or how it helped you, something that you picked up from the conference?
Sure. So I went to RSAD, which is the Advanced Research Seminar on Audio Description. It was the 10th year anniversary of the conference happening. It was a lot of researchers, practitioners in audio description. I mean, it was wall to wall, 3 days packed seminar. So it's hard to distill it into a few takeaways. The keynote and a lot of the workshops were about AI. And, we talk about AI in a lot of industries as well.
Mm.
I think, there are definitely different opinions and takes on it, but I think everyone would agree that humans are still important in the process, that it's still evolving. AI can be a tool, but It's lacking nuance and contextual awareness. I'm in awe of the work that AD writers do, and I just think it's something that AI has trouble figuring what is actually relevant. Whereas a human can watch the whole story, and they have to make so many choices because there are so many things that you could describe, but you have to describe what is most important so someone can understand what is going on. And I really think a human needs to do that. At the same time, we talked about how there are 5,000 hours of content uploaded to YouTube every single minute. 5,000 hours every minute. We don't have human capacity to describe that. So there are use cases for it as well. So yeah, it was just really interesting to have conversations as things are evolving so much right now.
Was there also a discussion about AI replacing the voice actors, or?
Well, I mean, yeah, some companies are already doing that, I think, to the detriment of quality. So there's also that discussion of, we sort of have to get away from the mentality of, well, it's better than nothing. If it's not acceptable to a sighted audience, why should it be acceptable for the blind audience? Like we need to make sure the quality is just as important as what we're offering. But at the same time, there was also a presentation, I think it was Matt Kaplowitz of Bridge Multimedia, who did a presentation about using AI in emergency situations. And he was talking about the LA fires. That's something where the most important thing is getting information out. The fires are spreading very quickly. And so that's a use case where it makes sense to me, right? Like you don't need a human. Yeah,
correct information.
Exactly. It's about the correct information to keep people safe. So it doesn't need me adding the meaning or nuance to it. So I thought that was a good example. But as far as like drama, art, dance, theater, performance, I really think it still makes such a difference to have the human voice being able to infuse it with meaning.
I agree completely. And last month, well, at the beginning of May, in fact, last weekend, the International Book Fair in Buenos Aires ended, and I attended. I think I told you, Kirsty, that I went to some talks about AI, books, and the audio world. That there were some specific talks that happened there at the International Book Fair, that it's a huge event here in Buenos Aires every year for 2 weeks approximately. And before the big welcome reception, there are some professional talks for people that you can go and participate. And there was one very interesting about AI and synthetic voices and all that, by Daniel Benchimol, who is an expert on all this technology related to mainly to books, but now also to audio. And he talked about a lot about 11 Labs. I don't know if you have heard about that software that is improving a lot, and the voices, the AI voices that the software uses are very good. Some of them almost seem to be like human, with emotion, unbelievable, Zion. But we were all like, what is this, a machine? I thought it was a person talking. So it's like we don't have to panic, but they are improving a lot and they are very good. And so it was like to raise awareness of what is going on and what is the many big companies are using, even to produce podcasts in other languages. For example, there are famous podcasts in English that the host of course, doesn't speak Spanish, for example, and hired, because he's a celebrity or a very well-known podcast, hired 11 labs, and the company prepares the same into Spanish, for example. And you listen to the podcast in Spanish as if the speaker was Spanish, but it's an American person. So it's weird, but I don't know, just food for thought.
Yeah, I've heard something like that on YouTube. In fact, it was annoying because it assumed that I wanted English rather than Portuguese, and I didn't. But it changed it automatically. But yeah, I mean that's not the same because that's not professionally created. But I think as somebody who listens to artificial voices all day, I mean my laptop, my phone in various languages, some of them are good, and that's how I do my job. That's how I work. So I'm somebody who's really familiar with working with them, but at the same time, when I want to read a book, when I want to relax, I it does make a difference for me. And maybe sometime in the distant future it will be, but for now, if I have the choice, I would definitely choose a real living, breathing human to listen to,
All of us.
because
Yes, sure.
yeah, because it's so much more relatable and there's more depth, there's more emotion. And yeah, it's not, I think even in my lifetime, the synthetic voices, like when I think about the one I used to have when I got my first one when I was 6 or something like that, and that was a very robotic voice, and it's definitely come a long way since then. But I also think there's a long way to go before it sounds anywhere close to humans. Speaking of humans, we've spoken about the interaction between end users and script writers, which is important. And I was just wondering, okay, we've touched on conferences too, but for anyone who isn't able to or doesn't want to attend a conference, how much interaction is there between the voice actors and the script writers? Like, because you're both part of the end product, you're both part of this process, but do you actually talk to each other? How does that work?
When it comes to streaming platforms, for example, there is no interaction between, in my experience at least, between audio description writer and voiceover actor. There's no interaction at all. Like, I provide my script, trying to make sure that the voice actor doesn't have to rush through the words to read the descriptions. However, when it comes to live theater performances, there is a lot of contact. There's a lot of back and forth between voice actors because, of course, the production is more contained. There are less people involved, so you can exchange ideas and opinions with your voice actor, and you can also tell them, like, maybe I would say this, I would read this sentence with a different tone. There's a lot more exchange in that case.
So the live productions still have a script. It's not like a live event where you have no idea what's going to happen, but they still have a script that they can work from, because the production should be the same every evening, like if it's a theater production.
About like theater performances, I'm talking about opera and ballet. And in that case, what I do is take part in rehearsals, and I know what 99.9% of the live theater performance is going to look like. Of course, there's always a small percentage of unpredictability, and that happens. You can't do anything about it. But yeah, you have a script that is going to be read to the audience, blind and visually impaired audience, and that is not going to change. Like, what has been written is not going to change. There may be small differences, but pretty much you have already written down.
Okay, so yeah, there's a certain amount of predictability, and I think that's important as well, because it opens up new ways of people to access culture. Because something like ballet, it's not just the music, it's what's going on. If you have no idea what's going on, like half of that is missing. You could listen to the music and appreciate it for what it is, but you don't have any of the information about the story and what's going on. So I think, again, people may have opted not to participate, whereas now they have the opportunity to if the audio description is provided, which is progress.
Yes. Also because ballet is always trying to tell you a story. It's not about people dancing without a purpose. There is a background plot. For example, think about a ballet of Cinderella or maybe Black Swan. There is a background plot, a reason why dancers are moving that way, or maybe they're pretending to cry and stuff like that. And so the aim of audio description in that case is not just to tell them that the dancer is pirouetting or doing an arabesque, is always also trying to tell the story behind it so that the audience can follow what is happening on the stage.
Because without it, because I went with a friend and the sound system for the audio description was broken that day. So we stayed because it was her birthday present and we were there and we wanted to, but I had no idea the entire time the story, which so yeah, I can without in this particular context. With some other contexts you can kind of figure it out and try to imagine what's going on, but yeah, something like this context you really need it if the visually impaired people have any idea of what the story is, what's going on.
If we talk about the collaboration between the writer and the voiceover actor in audio description, I think the collaboration between them is essential to delivering an engaging and accessible experience. For example, once the script is written, the voiceover actor brings it to life. The role is not only to read the descriptions, but to do with the right tone, pacing, and emotion to match the content. For example, a dramatic scene might require to use a more serious or intense tones, for example. And I think the key to successful audio description is a strong collaboration between the two. The writer needs to be creating description that are well timed with the visual, while the voiceover actor must bring those words to life with the proper delivery. Often the writer and the voiceover actor will work together to make adjustment during recording section, for example, ensuring it fits naturally with the flow of the content. And
yeah, so just as we're finishing up, I just wanted to ask if for all of you, if you have any tips for your colleagues who are maybe interested in becoming involved in this type of work, so language professionals who may be translators, working with language in other ways, maybe have experience working with like audiovisual tasks but haven't done audio description before. What would you advise them to do? What is the first step? You've all had quite different journeys, but what could people do if they think, I'd like to get involved with this and I'm not sure where to start? The lack of training doesn't make it so good, but maybe some languages are better than others in terms of what's available. But do you have any tips for your colleagues?
I do have a recommendation in English. The American Council of the Blind has an audio description institute, which is 20 hours of training. So that will provide like a nice overview to start. And that Facebook group you're talking about, I am part of that audio description discussion group. And I just learn a lot because I get to hear from the end users, as you say. And also just start turning the audio description track on when you're watching something, because like you said, there aren't a ton of performance training in AD for me. So my education has been listening to what's already out there and sort of learning what people are doing, and then sort of triangulating that with what I'm reading that people want to hear. And yeah, so just start listening to it and see if it's something you want to be involved in.
Yeah, that's great.
Also try to contact colleagues, listen to them, talk to them, benefit from their experience. And then in Germany we have organizations who are involved in audio description and audio described movies. They have tips, they have hints, they can also arrange contacts. That would be a start. But also the first thing always is to put on the audio description track and listen and watch.
And if we talk about any tips and tricks for someone to want to join audio description area, I think that there's a few tips. For example, collaborate and communicate, because audio description is about teamwork. All the people involved need to be communicating constantly to make sure everything's aligned. Another tip would be stay connected and open for feedback, to be honest. And also, other important point is adapt. Don't just translate. If you're working, for example, in a bilingual project, remember that cultural context is key. Just don't translate description word by word. Instead, adapt them to make sure they resonate in both language. Besides that, another big tip, stay curious and keep learning. I feel in audio description is always evolving, and always look for new ways to improve your craft. The more you learn, I think, the better you'll be at creating immersive and impactful descriptions. Like any skills, this improves with consistent practice, so take every opportunity to refine it, whether through courses, feedback, or simply working on different projects. For example, online courses like Curtin offer great resources from the basic. You need to know about the audio description. So I think that's a good one. So every step you take to learn more helps refine your craft and keeps you moving with the industry's evolution in general. So yeah.
I would also add that several colleagues of mine didn't have any experience when they started, but the way they managed to get noticed by other companies was by posting on LinkedIn and experimenting with like opening credits, brief scenes, or of any available movie or episode or whatever available on YouTube. They would create audio description and they would present them to their LinkedIn audience, and they would try to initiate a discussion and exchange opinions. And that's how you also get to improve and to understand how a colleague, a professional thinks when they approach the video you're looking at.
I've never seen anyone doing that, but I think it's a really cool idea. And if I understood the language in which it was being done, I would definitely comment just to give it some more, to be part of the discussion and to give it some more visibility, because I think that's it's good to. LinkedIn can be used for so many things, and starting this kind of discussion is one, and getting noticed. So yeah, it doesn't have to be that, oh, I don't have any experience, I can't do this. There are ways to start building that experience by having the conversations with others, by listening, by thinking about what you would like to know. Like if you, or even if you were trying to explain that to someone else, like who couldn't see it, what would be missing? What would you like to know from this scene that you're watching? What's important? And I think, not necessarily talking about audio description, but with some of my friends have said in the past that if they are describing something for me, then it makes them look more closely and more carefully and think more carefully about what they're actually seeing. So that's a good skill to have if this is something that you're looking to develop and to become involved with.
Yes, and as Francesca said, also perhaps be bold enough to try, rehearse, practice every day while you are, I don't know, during the weekends, doing whatever, or watching whatever movie or series, or and do it like yourself all the time while listening and mirroring what others are doing or what other YouTube videos have, and trying first copy and make it with your own touch, but beginning like working by yourself. It's always practice. Practice makes perfect.
Yeah, it helps you to build your confidence and to think about things that you maybe hadn't thought about before you started.
Yes, and always try to think, as you said, Kirsty, your audience, not your own. You're like, this is fine. No, is this good enough, or does this fit the person who is going to listen to this and all that? I mean, to focus more on the audience, not on your own, on yourself.
And to find out where your biases are, because like for me, maybe I would focus too much on all the animals because I love animals, but if there's something really important going on that's not to do with them, that's not the thing that I would need to be talking about, if I was writing the script. So yeah, we all have biases or things that we find more interesting or things that we don't find interesting. But yeah, it's thinking about like a general audience, what is important, or what would be important for them, not just what you think is really cool or interesting. Okay, I think that's covered it. I will add links to everybody's LinkedIn profile. So everybody that's been here today, I will put their links on the show notes page so you can carry on the conversation or get in touch with them if you would like to do that. And maybe we'll add a couple of the links for the course and the Facebook group as well, so that anyone who's interested can join, because I think it's a public group, isn't it? It's open for anyone to join. So we'll do that. And thank you everybody for your time today and for sharing your experiences. And yeah, it's been great speaking with you, and I've learned some things as well, and I'm sure that the listeners have too. So thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you all.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.